Yes, the Belgian Congo. King Leopold's personal hobby project. Forget OnlyFans, Leopold basically ran the world's darkest subscription service. Instead of monthly fees, he charged in rubber, ivory, and, let's be blunt, human dignity. Swipe right for exploitation, swipe left for mutilation. Except nobody got to choose. Before we dive into this colonial Tinder nightmare, smash that subscribe like Leopold smashing treaties, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Midnight doom scroll or sneaky office binge? The Belgian Congo wasn't just a colony, it was Leopold II's private plaything. Imagine Jeff Bezos buying the Amazon rainforest, not to deliver packages faster, but to turn the forest into his personal dungeon. That's the level of absurdity. From the outside, Belgium marketed Congo as a civilizing mission. Pamphlets depicted missionaries in white linen, teaching children letters and handing out crosses. But inside the jungle, oh, it was kink meets cruelty. Whole villages enslaved, families torn apart, and women held as hostages to make sure men harvested enough rubber. Romance? More like ransom with extra steps. Picture this. Honey, I brought you flowers. Sorry, not in Leopold's Congo. It was, honey, I brought you severed hands, or else they'll cut off mine. The sexual practices of the Congo Free State weren't about love. They were about domination. Soldiers used women as trophies, proof of conquest, living propaganda for European superiority. Reports from missionaries whispered of forced concubinage, where village girls became wives to colonial officers. Wives in quotes, because they were really hostages with lipstick. And the gossip? It traveled faster than TikTok trends. Brussels cafes buzzed with whispers of Congo pleasures, colonial officers living in harems, hosting drunken parties, and writing home about their exotic mistresses as if they were collectibles. Pamphlets printed cartoons mocking the King's Congo playground, showing him gorging on rubber while natives were chained in the background. Think of it like tabloid headlines, but instead of celebrity caught cheating, it was colonial governor caught with 14 wives and a rubber quota. Leopold, of course, denied everything. He presented himself as a devout Catholic monarch, but hypocrisy was the Belgian national sport. Behind stained glass windows, the royal court snickered about officers' Congo escapades. Satirical songs played in Brussels cabarets. Leopold painted as a perverse sugar daddy funding orgies with Congolese blood. Missionaries wrote desperate letters. The women here are being treated as currency. But Europe turned the other cheek as long as rubber flowed and the stock market stayed hot. Because let's be real, Netflix hadn't been invented yet, so Scandal was their primetime entertainment. By 1904, the mask slipped. Photographs surfaced, not just of mutilated hands, but of women lined up like auction lots, guarded by smug officers. The world gasped. Well, half of it gasped. The other half poured another glass of wine and whispered, "Have you heard what really happens in Leopold's Congo?" Colonial cruelty was horrifying, but European gossip treated it like a guilty pleasure series. Game of Thrones, but everyone loses. So yes, Leopold's Congo was less civilization and more 50 Shades of exploitation. And trust me, in the next part, the scandals get darker. Because what happened in the jungle didn't stay in the jungle. If you thought Leopold's Congo was just about rubber quotas and severed hands, oh no, this empire also doubled as the world's most twisted dating app. Except instead of swiping left, you got chained. Instead of a dinner date, you got whipped. Romantic, right? Let's talk about forced companionship. Colonial soldiers didn't just patrol villages, they took women by the dozen to keep in military camps. Officially, they were labeled as wives. Unofficially, they were hostages with benefits. Soldiers bragged in letters home about their Congo mistresses, writing as if they were souvenirs bought at a market stall. Imagine Tinder bios reading, hobbies, hunting rubber, keeping 3 hostages, sending awkward postcards to Belgium. Women were used as bargaining chips. If a man failed his rubber quota, his wife or daughter would be seized by soldiers. Families were literally split apart so Leopold's stockpile of ivory and rubber could grow. Think of it as Amazon Prime delivery, but instead of 2-day shipping, it was 2-day punishment. Missionaries reported cases of soldiers sharing women across entire battalions. Some villages whispered legends of European officers who kept harems so large they needed spreadsheets to manage them. One letter described a commander who paraded his wives like trophies, dressing them in European gowns as if to mock their culture. It was exploitation disguised as luxury cosplay. European gossip columns ate this up like it was Love Island Congo edition, except instead of beach villas, the backdrop was huts, rifles, and palm trees. Back in Belgium, whispers turned into satire. Pamphlets mocked officers with cartoons of them juggling women while balancing ledgers of rubber profits. Cabaret singers performed songs about Congo harems with punchlines like, "More wives than Leopold had lies." But behind the satire was horror. Women weren't just playthings, they were systematically dehumanized. Children born from these encounters were often abandoned, labeled as half-caste problems. Some officers even wrote guides on how to manage local women, as if they were livestock. Imagine colonial BuzzFeed articles. 10 tips for handling your Congolese mistress. Number 7 will shock you. Spoiler alert, number 7 was always whips. The hypocrisy was rich. In Brussels, Leopold's regime presented itself as the most Catholic mission, spreading purity and faith. Meanwhile, in Congo, soldiers were running what can only be described as state-sponsored brothels. Missionaries cried out, writing, "The treatment of women here is beyond sinful. They are made currency." Their letters were conveniently lost in government archives. By 1905, international pressure mounted. Photos began circulating, not just of mutilations, but of women in chains beside officers smirking at the camera. The world started asking, how could Belgium, a tiny, polite nation known for waffles and lace, run a colony that looked like a medieval hellscape dressed in white suits? It's like finding out your grandma runs an underground fight club. You just can't look at the lace tablecloth the same way again. The ultimate irony, Belgium's monarchy profited from all of this and still managed to convince Europe it was a humanitarian project. In reality, it was Netflix's darkest historical drama. Only, it wasn't streaming, it was bleeding. Leopold's Congo was less missionary zeal, more military tinder. And trust me, part 3 gets even worse, because when the gossip reached London and Paris, the colonial PR disaster turned into a full-blown circus. If Leopold thought he could run the world's most twisted OnlyFans behind jungle curtains, he forgot one tiny detail. Europe had newspapers, and nothing sells faster than scandal, especially when it involves sex, wicks, and a king with a beard that looked like it could hide entire mistresses. By the early 1900s, the Congo wasn't just a colony, it was a gossip goldmine. Pamphlets flew through Europe faster than memes on TikTok. Cartoons showed Leopold with women chained to his throne. Cabaret songs rhymed Leopold with "too bold." And suddenly, the polite salons Paris and London were buzzing. Did you hear what the Belgians are doing in Africa? Think of it as 1905 Twitter, only instead of hashtags, you had hand-pressed leaflets. London journalists published exposés describing women used as camp companions. One even wrote, "Leopold's colony is not governed, but violated." That line became the 1900s equivalent of trending on the front page. Meanwhile, Belgium scrambled for damage control. The monarchy released official reports that looked like today's bad PR statements. All polished lies, no accountability. They insisted, "Our mission is to civilize, not exploit." Oh, really? Tell that to the officers hosting jungle harems bigger than European opera casts. Imagine LinkedIn profiles of Congo officers. Skills? Rubber extraction, hostage management, mistress logistics. But satire wasn't just in Europe. In Congo itself, whispers turned to rebellion. Villagers spread stories of soldiers cursed by the women they abused. Some even claimed officers went mad, haunted by the ghosts of mothers and daughters they'd taken. Whether true or not, it terrified men who thought they could dominate without consequence. Back in Brussels, Parliament faced the heat. Debates raged. One politician sneered, "We are not rulers, we are pimps." That line was recorded in newspapers and echoed across Europe. Imagine the Belgian PR team trying to spin that. The Catholic Church tried to distance itself, insisting it had nothing to do with Congo's immoral practices. But leaked letters from missionaries painted another story. Priests were begging the Vatican to intervene. One letter read, "Women are treated as coin, exchanged, bartered, stolen." Another admitted, "We are powerless to protect them." That's not missionary zeal, that's a resignation letter with extra guilt sprinkles. What really stung Leopold wasn't the truth, it was the mockery. Parisian cabarets performed skits of him juggling women, priests, and prophets like a circus clown. London tabloids drew him as a spider spinning webs of rubber and lust. Even Belgian cartoonists joined in, portraying him as King Casanova of the Congo. Meanwhile, ordinary Belgians sipping coffee in lace-curtained houses gossiped, "Our king? No better than a brothel keeper." The scandal was no longer hidden in the jungle, it was dinner table entertainment. Picture it, Belgian grandmas whispering colonial smut stories over waffles. The pressure finally reached breaking point. In 1908, Leopold was forced to hand Congo over to the Belgian state. The excuse? For better governance. The reality? Europe was tired of the sex and slavery headlines. Leopold's personal harem colony was now a national embarrassment. The Congo wasn't just bleeding rubber and ivory, it was bleeding reputation. And the king who thought he could hide his dirtiest secrets behind palm trees ended up roasted in pamphlets and cabarets. But wait until you see part 4, because even after losing Congo, Leopold wasn't done being Europe's dirtiest old man. After 1908, Leopold was stripped of Congo, but not of money. He had mountains of wealth from rubber and ivory. And what did he do with it? Not hospitals, not schools. He invested in personal luxuries. Specifically, one, a Parisian teenager named Caroline Lacroix. Imagine a billionaire losing a tech company and then spending all his fortune on online subscriptions. Caroline was 16 when they met. Leopold, a grandfather in his 70s. The math doesn't even scream May-December romance, it screams December and the grave. He showered her with diamonds, mansions, and even a title, Baroness. Belgians nicknamed her Queen of the Congo, because technically, Congo money was funding her wardrobe. The press roasted him daily. One French paper called him the world's richest sponsor. A British cartoonist drew Caroline sitting on a mountain of rubber while Leopold bowed before her. Meanwhile, Belgian politicians begged him to stop flaunting this unusual relationship. Did he listen? Absolutely not. Leopold treated criticism the way he treated African lives, completely disposable. The gossip was relentless. Caroline was accused of influencing state decisions, of sneaking bribes through her family, of even blackmailing ministers. Parliament whispered she had more power in Leopold's private life than they did in the chamber. And honestly, they weren't wrong. By now, Leopold's reputation wasn't just bad, it was radioactive. Brussels cafes had running jokes. What's the difference between Leopold and a tavern keeper? The tavern keeper pays taxes. Even cabaret singers in Paris began including Caroline in their acts. If Leopold was trending, Caroline was the headline. And it gets pettier. When Leopold's daughters confronted him about his obsession, he cut them out of his inheritance. Entire fortunes gone. Instead, he left mansions, jewels, and titles to Caroline. His daughters were furious. The public was scandalized. But Leopold? He was too busy posing in photographs with his young companion draped in pearls. It was the ultimate royal late-life crisis, except there was no late-mid left in his life. He was in his 70s, coughing, gray, and clinging to a girl who could have been his granddaughter. Forget awkward dating stories. This was dynastic humiliation on a national scale. When he finally died in 1909, Caroline was with him. Belgians cheered in the streets, calling it Liberation Day. And in one last insult, they booed his funeral procession. Imagine a king buried under jeers with his companion holding diamonds funded by colonial wealth. This leaves us with Europe's most scandalous monarch, a man who lost his colony but doubled down on controversy. Leopold thought history would remember him as a builder of monuments. Instead, he's remembered as the king who swapped an empire for a teenage companion. And in Part 5, we'll see just how deep the humiliation ran, because even death couldn't erase his disgrace. Most kings die with statues, ceremonies, and solemn hymns. Leopold? He died with boos echoing down Brussels streets and mistresses clutching pearls bought with blood money. Honestly, if Netflix made a show, they'd call it The Crown, but make it gross. December 1909, the Builder King is dead, but instead of tears, the Belgians popped metaphorical champagne. Crowds booed as his coffin passed through Brussels. Imagine a royal funeral trending on Twitter with hashtags like Good Riddance and hashtag King Creep. That's exactly the vibe. Caroline Lacrosse, the teenage mistress turned baroness, tried to keep her diamonds. Problem? Parliament swooped in. Belgian lawmakers declared most of Leopold's wealth ill-gotten and seized it back for the state. The public cheered, Caroline wept. It was the original case of, sorry babe, no inheritance for you. Forget prenups, this was the state doing a chargeback on an entire fortune. But the real humiliation came in the gossip columns. Satirical magazines painted Leopold as a vampire sucking Congo dry and Caroline as the blood pearl queen. One pamphlet joked, Leopold gave Congo to Caroline, then gave Caroline to the Undertaker. Harsh? Yes. Popular? Absolutely. Even Europe's royals mocked him. British newspapers compared him to Caligula. French salons gossiped that Caroline was writing a memoir titled Sleeping with Empire. Of course, she didn't, but the joke stuck. If TikTok existed in 1910, Leopold would have been trending under hashtag messy royal talk. Meanwhile, Belgium inherited the Congo, but not peace of mind. The scandals didn't vanish with Leopold's last breath. Instead, they became Belgium's national baggage. Every time they tried to brag about chocolate or lace, someone whispered, yes, but what about Congo? It was like having a family WhatsApp group where no one forgets that one cousin's prison sentence. Caroline herself, she didn't disappear. She lived in Paris, still flaunting jewels, still despised. To Belgians, she was a walking ghost of Leopold's sins. One satirical play even had a character named Madame Congo, dripping in diamonds while peasants begged at her feet. Everyone knew who it was meant to be. Imagine being subtweeted in literal theater productions. As for Leopold's legacy, his monuments stood tall in Brussels. Grand arches, statues, avenues. But people didn't see marble and stone. They saw Congo blood. Activists plastered his statues with pamphlets. Some even smeared red paint, decades before modern protesters did the same. The king wanted to be remembered as a visionary. Instead, he became Europe's creepiest meme. And here's the irony. In trying to immortalize himself through empire and monuments, Leopold made sure he'd never escape his scandals. His name became shorthand for greed, cruelty, and sleaze. Not Leopold the Builder, not even Leopold the King, just Leopold the Monster. And so, we close the coffin lid on Leopold II, the king who lost an empire, ruined his reputation, and turned his funeral into a public roast. But don't think the Congo scandals end here, because in Part 6, we'll peel back what Belgium did after Leopold, and trust me, the nightmares didn't stop with the king's last breath.